9 o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Our guy Ed Bird on the other side of the glass producing today. Decided to give Captain Dave a couple days off because he works so hard around here. So he'll be back in a little bit later on in the week. So appreciate Ed Bird hanging out with us for the next couple of days here as we navigate through the slower portion of March Madness these next couple days. You had the conclusion of the women's second round action last night. Had some great games. Indiana getting past Oklahoma, which sets them up for the date with South Carolina in the Sweet 16. Iowa and West Virginia played a wildly entertaining game last night where it looked like for a moment in the last couple of minutes there, West Virginia might be able to put together the come from behind and knock Caitlin Clark out of the NCAA tournament in her final game up there at Carver Hawkeye Arena, but Iowa was able to hang on. So the potential of a South Carolina-Iowa national championship is still possible as we head into the Sweet 16 a little bit later on this week. I didn't think we would be talking as much about the South Carolina men this week after, of course, they had gotten bounced in the first round of the NCAA tournament by Oregon last week. But lo and behold, we did have some news that broke yesterday evening that was not the best to learn, but there's a lot of different angles to it, to say the least. That news, of course, being that Meechie Johnson, leading scorer for the Gamecocks this season, has elected to jump back into the transfer portal. Of course, he transferred to South Carolina 2 seasons ago after coming over from Ohio State. He still has 1 year of eligibility. We assumed that he was going to be sticking around here at South Carolina, but that certainly does not seem to be the case. And in a very rare instance, somebody that has entered the transfer portal, which, by the way, the portal opened a week ago on last Monday. So it's been open for over a week. You've seen a fair amount of guys go into it so far, but this obviously being the first one from South Carolina. And in a rare instance, typically when guys or girls decide to go into the transfer portal, we don't get a press conference. We don't, usually hear from them outside of, those long notes, screenshots from their iPhone that they put on Twitter about I'm doing what's best for me and respect my decision and all that kind of stuff. Rarely do we actually ever hear from the person themselves actually talking about the decision to enter the transfer portal. But Meechie Johnson took to Instagram Live last night to address everything head on. Here is what Meechie Johnson had to say.
But yeah, just want to say I appreciate all the fans out there from USC, bro. Like, it was a great 2 years, you know what I'm saying? Great 2 years, and definitely had some of the most fun I ever had in my life, you know what I'm saying, coming there. But at the end of the day, where we at now, I just got to make the best decision for me. There's going to be so many talks, like, you know what I'm saying? He was talking to these people, doing this, doing that. Like, I haven't talked to nobody yet. I haven't did. At the end of the day, like I said, like most people don't understand, like I love South Carolina. I learned a lot about coming out here. And I appreciate the university for everything, you know what I'm saying? Coach Paris, the whole staff, everybody, like, they really took care of me, made me feel like family. Every game, everybody made me feel like family, especially being so far away from home with everything. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people going to say what they want, like I said. People going to talk about loyalty and stuff like that. At the end of the day, like, most of y'all know in my position, so y'all not going to understand, you know what I'm saying, what it is, and, why certain things got to be done. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, like I said, I got to do what's best for me and my family. And that's that. But all love still with SC, everybody here. All love with the coaching staff. You feel me? Like I said, they took care of me since day one. Everybody, took me in since day one. And at the end of the day, I had to get all this on my own. Like, people gonna say what they want, but I had to make a name. I had to do this. So, like I said, all glory to God still too. And yeah, man, I'm sorry. Some people gonna be hurt. Some people not gonna understand. But again, it's the best decision I had to make for me and my family. And there's no bad issues, no bad blood with South Carolina. You know what I'm saying? South Carolina was great to me and my family. If anybody come here after and not making a bad decision, Coach Paris is a great coach. He's very, very good at being able to develop players and take their game to the next level, which he did with me. So, again, all love go to them.
And that's not an easy thing to do. I imagine Meechie Johnson was seeing some of the negative things maybe being said about him on Twitter or Instagram in this case, and just wanted to, address it head on, and give his thoughts and feelings on why this is taking place. And in today's world of college sports, we shouldn't be shocked when anybody goes in the transfer portal. You don't have to like it, but it's become such a norm across the landscape of college sports now. It's not exactly shocking when somebody goes in. That being said, there are a lot of people when a player transfers from their respective school to go wherever, there's this, I don't want to say it's a desire, but there's this, routine that a lot of people have where they automatically skew to the negative and talking bad about that player and saying, well, he wasn't that great, or, well, we don't need him, and blah, 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 blah. There's no two ways about it. This is a big blow to South Carolina. He was obviously the leading scorer on this team. Now, was he the only superstar player on this team? No, and I wouldn't even put superstar on anybody on this team because they were more of a sum of all their parts more than anything else. But he was a key piece in this team's success this season, though he was streaky at times where, he wasn't consistently going out there and scoring 15, 20 points a night, had some many single-digit performances, throughout his time this season that is well documented. We talked about that plenty of different ways, but regardless, he was still a key part of this team in a variety of ways, not only from what he was able to do on the court with some of those amazing games that he's had, but also from a leadership standpoint as well. And I don't think that can be undersold. Here's a guy that came in 2 seasons ago, was one of the first to really buy in to what Lamont Paris was selling. And for him to be able to come in from the transfer portal, where he had previously been at Ohio State, where he was just a guy coming off the bench, wasn't a featured player. He came here seeking the opportunity to be a featured member of a Power 5 team, and that's what he was able to do. And again, as he mentioned in his Instagram Live there, he sang the praises of Coach Paris and saying anybody would be lucky to come down here and play for him, and, they'll get you where you need to go and all that kind of stuff. And, for Meechie Johnson to be such a huge part of helping build what Lamont Paris has been able to do in 2 years, that sucks to see him go. And from a leadership standpoint, as I mentioned, when you have a guy that's streaky like he is and has a lot of ups and downs, it can go from scoring 25 points one game to scoring 5 points the next game. They're not always going to be in the best frame of mind or have the right mindset to deal with those kind of ups and downs. But I go back to like the first Missouri game South Carolina played this season, where Meechie Johnson was not playing well, ended up getting benched in the final few minutes of that game, and I think sat most of overtime as well. There are a lot of players around the country, especially if you're a leading scorer on a team, that may just kind of collapse into themselves sitting on the bench and not want to be as engaged and still be that leader. But Meechie Johnson's in the huddle. Meechie Johnson's hyping guys up. Meechie Johnson's doing what he needs to do to help his team still win the game, and lo and behold, they did. So that is something else that you're losing in Meechie Johnson going into the transfer portal and not returning for his third and final year at South Carolina. So now it obviously begs the question of, well, why is he doing this? And Meechie addressed it in his video there, saying, well, I haven't talked to anybody, don't speculate on where I might be going or whatever it may be. Of course, we're going to speculate because you typically don't enter the transfer portal unless you know you have a good idea of where a landing spot might end up being. And, of course, with Meechie Johnson being a former Ohio State player and being from the state of Ohio, it's natural to look, and there's a lot of rumors surrounding it, that he might be returning to play for the Buckeyes. And I thought J.C. Sherbert brought up a really interesting point earlier on when talking to Bill and Preston that, South Carolina played in Pittsburgh this past week in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Meechie Johnson talked about it in his press availability. Going to have a lot of family there, a lot of friends, a lot of people getting to see him play in person that don't typically get to all the way down here in South Carolina or throughout the SEC, because it's just not quite as feasible for them. So did playing in front of family and friends maybe spark something for him? Perhaps. His dad could see him play, other members of his family making a short drive out there to Pittsburgh as opposed to coming all the way down here to South Carolina. So that could have really sparked something. And also, again, he's been there before, and now he potentially has the opportunity to go back and be a featured guy. I don't know if he's going to be the guy if he goes back to Ohio State, but definitely can be one of the guys on that team if he does ultimately decide to come back. And I imagine, now I don't know what the NIL situation looks like from a basketball standpoint necessarily up at Ohio State. We know they've done a lot and made big strides as far as football goes, but if Michie Johnson did return to that team, I imagine they wouldn't make it worth his while. And I don't pretend to know what his NIL situation was down here, but I imagine it was pretty solid. But a place like Ohio State may be able to offer him even more. And again, that's speculation at this point. We're just kind of, saying what we think about it, but there's certainly potential there. Jack Diebler, who was an assistant coach while he was there at Ohio State, has now been named as the head coach. And he obviously helped or took over the reins as the interim to close out this season, and is now heading into the 2024-2025 season as the guy. And I imagine he and Michie Johnson have some kind of relationship, probably a very good one. Going back to Michie Johnson's time there when he was an assistant. So the connections make sense. If that, does end up happening, we'll have to wait and see. I imagine it won't be too terribly long before we get an announcement on that. Ohio State's playing in the NIT right now, so maybe they wait until, all that's done with them. But if Michie Johnson does decide to go back to Ohio State, again, wouldn't be really a shock to anybody. And we can't ignore this from the standpoint of what this means for South Carolina either. Because you go into this offseason knowing that you're already losing Talon Cooper, B.J. Mack, and Stephen Clark as well, but mainly Talon Cooper and B.J. Mack. And now you have Michie the Bunch. That's three of your top four scorers from this past season. And now the natural question is, well, hopefully nobody else goes in the transfer portal, right? Because as of right now, we in CMB has said specifically he plans to come back next year. So I believe we can safely lock him in, but you hope that you have Miles Stute, Jacoby Wright, Zach Davis, those kind of guys all coming back to be the foundation of what this team's going to be coming up next season. It's not a guarantee. And Miles Stute, again, transferred in here this past year. Maybe he could transfer somewhere else. You never know. So until these guys give us the 100% confirmation, we're going to be skeptical and worried that those guys could also potentially seek opportunities elsewhere. We already knew that Lamont Paris was going to have to go out this offseason and bring in guys from the transfer portal, as every coach is trying to do. Specifically a vet guard like Talon Cooper was, who really ran this offense this year and was a big reason why South Carolina was so successful across the board. So definitely going to have to get somebody like that, as well as a couple other pieces around him to complement whoever that is and what he's able to do. And this is the point where, and look, he just got paid, and rightfully so, a couple weeks ago, where you just have to place your trust in Lamont Paris that he's going to be able to do what he needs to do and make the right moves in the offseason to ensure that South Carolina is going to be in a good situation going into 2024 and 2025. Obviously, he showed it this past season by bringing in all those guys, Talon Cooper, B.J. Mack, and Miles Stute, that helped bolster this offense or bolster this team as a whole. And we just got to hope that he's going to be able to do that again. So it's a process that's going to take time over the offseason. And now that the portal's open, guys can obviously enter. And that means guys can also go to new schools as well. So we'll see what Lamont Paris does here in the short term as far as that is concerned. Second week of football, spring football underway. Heard from some players yesterday. We'll dive into that coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Tuesday morning on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Tuesday morning. I want to remind you, as always, about the 107.5 The Game Spring Golf Tournament coming up next Friday out at the Charlwood Golf Club in West Columbia. If you want to take part, if it's $400 for a foursome, $200 for a pair. If you want to be a part of it, give Charlwood a call, 803-755-2000 to register. Going to be giving away all kinds of stuff, USC baseball tickets, Carowin tickets, craft beer cards, all plenty of cool things to give away out there at the Charlwood Golf Club coming up next week. That's on next Friday, 10 a.m. shotgun start, so please take part in it if you can, the 107.5 Game Spring Golf Tournament. Today, another spring football practice set to get underway, actually, in about 10 minutes' time, really. Starting about 9:30, practice number 4 of the spring for South Carolina football will be rolling. As always, we'll hear from Coach Beamer coming up at 12:30. That'll be during the halftime show with myself and Terry Ford. How much can be learned through the first couple of practices of the spring? It's debatable. And look, Coach Beamer is going to be asked a lot of questions today about where this guy is and where that guy is and what he's figuring out with the depth chart and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know how much we can glean from just a handful of practices so far. I think when you talk about these first couple practices of spring, a lot of it is guys settling in and getting acclimated, especially when you're talking about, the true freshmen as well as guys coming in for the transfer portal. They're just kind of getting up to speed with everything within this program. And one of those guys that is new to campus is Robbie Ashford, the transfer quarterback from Auburn, started his career out at Oregon, that's coming in to compete for the starting job alongside Lenore Sellers, David Bevel, Dante Reno, all those kind of guys. And he, compared to everybody else in that quarterback room, brings the most experience in, having previously been a starter at Auburn, and again, just having been around the game of college football for longer than all of these other guys. And he spoke to the media yesterday, as well as several other players did, and really talked about what is different about him and what he's learned through his journey of his career that he's bringing to South Carolina here.
I mean, just the first thing is I knew when I first came into college it was going to be a learning year. We had older guys at Oregon, and just come in there and try and learn everything you can, and some circumstances don't go your way. And that taught me a lot when I was a freshman, just life isn't easy. That's been a testament to my life. There's been a lot of bad things happen to me, but I'm still here, so it's just a blessing. But you learn in college that it's a business, and you're not going to always get what you want, but it doesn't mean you stop working. And that's what I learned from my freshman year just to now, just the situations I've been through, the hardships I've gone through. It's taught me, hey, life isn't easy. Life is going to try and kick you down, but it's just how do you bounce back, how do you keep going? And that's been really big, and I just try and bring that here because I know it might be some days I might not practice the way I want to. It's like, okay, I know I'm human. I can't let that defeat me for the next practice and the practice after that. I got to go in there, go see what I did wrong, come back and just not make those mistakes again and just have fun. I mean, having fun, it sounds, like I said, cliche, but when you're having fun, you're the best version of yourself. And I feel like a lot of guys, we can get uptight and just try and do too much, and that takes the fun out of it, and that takes us from just being able to do what we do. So I would say those are two big things. And then just hard work. I mean, just working. The work never stops. And, as a freshman, you're like, man, this is a lot. But as the years go on, you're like, okay, this is just like clockwork. It's just come in, do it, know what you got to do, know what you got to do extra, and then just repeat it every single day. So that's what I would say I've learned.
For one, I firmly appreciate the fact that Robbie Ashford gives really long and thought-out answers. That's something that you don't see as much as in the athletes. And look, none of these guys are comfortable in front of microphones and cameras, and I understand that. But when you do run into a guy like Robbie Ashford, and legitimately, if you go back and listen to his press conference yesterday, he was asked the simple question of who sticks out to you from what you've seen so far, talking about other guys on the offense. And I kid you not, he went on like a 4-minute answer literally talking about just the entire roster worth of guys. So I appreciate that from an in-depth standpoint of kind of getting a lot more insight that we don't typically get as much of from players when we hear from them in these kind of media availabilities. But, he talked about that experience that he's had from his time at Oregon, from his time at Auburn, having been a starter for many, many games at Auburn as well, that he brings that to the table and certainly is going to, help him in his competition for quarterback. Again, we think Lenore Sellers has the inside track to the job with just having been here for a longer period of time than Robbie Ashford, being up to speed on the playbook, the relationship with Dow Loggins, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't mean Robbie Ashford can't win the job, but we believe that it's going to, as we've talked about many times, going to have to be something where he's just leaps and bounds better than Lenore Sellers to end up getting that nod. But one dynamic of this relationship that I don't think we've really talked about a whole lot is how beneficial he can be for a guy like Lenore Sellers if he does end up winning the job. Think about it from this perspective. Lenore Sellers comes in a season ago as a true freshman. Spencer Rattler already in place, already the guy, and really no competition going into last season. So Lenore Sellers got to sit on the bench and learn from a guy that had been there and done that in college football, had started a ton of games, had been at 3 different programs, had seen all kinds of different offenses, had faced about every conceivable scenario you can imagine as a quarterback. And Lenore Sellers got to learn from that, got to be in the same room as him, got to go through reps and practice with him, and really kind of take in all that information and learn from a true vet of the college game like Spencer Rattler. Now, as we get set to transition to likely Lenore Sellers being the quarterback, having that veteran presence still in the room, I think, is vitally important, because while Spencer Rattler is going to be off in the NFL, sure, Sellers can hit him up from time to time and maybe talk through some things, but he's not going to be that presence that's in the locker room and on the sidelines with him every single day in every single game, and Robbie Ashford can be that guy. And again, Robbie Ashford's coming in here with the mindset that he's going to be the starting quarterback and he's going to compete to his best ability to make sure that happens. But even if he doesn't end up being the starting quarterback, they're still teammates at the end of the day. So he is going to do what he needs to do to make sure this team is successful and help this team win. And if that means helping out Lenore Sellers, then he's going to do that, or really should do that. And as Sellers goes through his first season as a starting quarterback, having that veteran as your backup, as that guy on the sidelines, when you face situations, when you face scenarios that you've never been in before, and just need a little bit of advice, or, hey, how would you go about this? What is your thought process on this or this situation or whatever it may be? He still has that guy, and Robbie Ashford now that he can, ask and lean into a little bit, saying, hey, I'm unfamiliar with this. What do you think? What's your ideas? What are your thoughts? And he can give him that advice that hopefully can benefit him playing good on the field as well. So I don't think it can be undersold how important having a veteran presence now likely behind him in the depth chart as opposed to in front of him is going to be for Lenore Sellers as he goes into this, first season as a starting quarterback. Should, of course, he win the job, because we'll continue to have to put that little caveat on there until he's officially named the starter. But again, that's what the common thinking is, that he will end up being the starter. And, when he does, hopefully, as I said when Robbie Ashford came in, the ideal scenario is that he never has to play a meaningful snap of football this entire season. He can come in garbage time, whatever it may be, but that Lenore Sellers is out there, win the games or win the moments count, and, when the plays are of their utmost importance. And, that can hopefully be the foundation for what is a great college career for a guy like Lenore Sellers. And if Robbie Ashford can help that in any way by being that veteran voice within the locker room, within the quarterback room, hopefully that's what it ends up being, and he can help Lenore Sellers out in a variety of ways. Yesterday, Coach Kingston, as he always does on Mondays, checked in with Elijah and Jay on the halftime show as he gets set for a big weekend matchup with Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa coming up here starting on Thursday. We'll hear a little bit of what he had to say and his look back on this past weekend as they picked up the victory against Vanderbilt in all 3 games out of Founders Park. We'll dive into that coming up. It is The Extra Point. I'm Tyler Head. Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass on your Tuesday morning on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head with you on this Tuesday morning. Remind you, as always, about the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway going on all season long. Whenever a Gamecocks hitter hits a Grand Slam this season, you could be the lucky recipient of however much money is in the pot, as we are at $600 right now, as we are still waiting for that first Grand Slam of the season for Gamecock baseball. And make sure you go online to 1075thegame.com and register each and every week for your chance to win. Your next opportunity comes up tonight as South Carolina will take on Presbyterian out at Founders Park. First pitch coming up at 6:30, 6:15 pregame, which you can listen to right here on the game. Presbyterian comes in with an 11-13 record on the season, though they do bring in two of the best hitters in the Big South Conference at their 2 and 3 hole spots. Brody Farr, the shortstop, hitting .395 on the season, and Joel Dragoo, the center fielder, who's hitting at .423 and is second in the Big South Conference with 34 RBIs. So sounds like a lineup of hitters that might test the pitching a little bit for South Carolina, as Eddie Copper will take to the mound once again, as he's been doing for the midweek games so far this season. Obviously, he's done a really, really good job despite being a true freshman, as we saw another true freshman get the start on Sunday, that being Tyler Pitzer, and we certainly sung his praises quite a bit yesterday for the great performance that he put in, not giving up any hits through his first couple innings, ending up with 9 strikeouts, and maybe solidifying himself as a weekend starter going forward, as South Carolina has kind of left that third spot open on Sundays for the most part this season. We've seen Roman Kimball, we've seen Ty Good, we've now seen Tyler Pitzer all get their opportunities there. And as you get into conference play, you would ideally like to solidify that third starter if you could, and maybe Tyler Pitzer has done that with his performance yesterday. As I mentioned, Coach Kingston was on with Jay and Elijah, as he does each and every Monday on the postgame show, just kind of recapping the weekend. And in talking about Tyler Pitzer, he kind of gave his assessment of what he sees out of his weekend starters so far. Cut number 21 here, Ed.
Well, we're going to continue to evaluate everything as we go. But one thing I do know is that we basically have, if you're looking at Pitzer, SQ, and Jones as your weekend starters, those guys are all sinker ballers with good velocity, but sinker ballers. And what you hope is that they can get a lot of quick outs, a lot of ground balls, and then you hand the ball off to your bullpen, and it's a lot of strikeout guys. And Good is a strikeout guy, and Beach is a strikeout guy, and Becker is a strikeout guy, and Gainey's a strikeout guy, and on and on. And so ideally, that's a really nice way to set up a pitching staff, because you want strikeout guys for the last 3 to 4 innings of a ball game, because that's when it takes some bad luck out of the equation for you. So if you're striking out over a guy an inning, that's only 2 outs that a team has to work with in terms of a bloop being able to fall in against you, or a ground ball having eyes and getting through. So, ideally you have your sinker ball guys starting games, getting you to the 5th or 6th, and then you hand it over to your strikeout guys where you can minimize bad luck against you. So, that's kind of a way we like to do it, but everything is always under consideration as we go, because if we think there's a way to make things better, we'll always look at that as well.
And when you look at both Eli Jones and Dylan Eskew, who have been the 2 consistent starters for South Carolina on the weekend so far this season, they fall right in line with exactly what Coach Kingston was talking about there. 2 guys that are very good at throwing those sinker balls, with the idea that you're going to want the batters to be a little bit on top of the ball, so when they do make contact and put it at play, it does end up being those ground balls, which are obviously lead to easier outs, with the balls not being able to escape the infield. And we look at the numbers in the SEC as a whole, Eli Jones and Dylan Eskew are among the best when it comes to that kind of situational, balls put in play situations. 62.5% of Eli Jones's, balls that are hit are grounders. Dylan Eskew's come in at 57.7%. Those 2 numbers are good for 1st and 3rd in the SEC overall as far as starting pitchers are concerned. So both those guys doing a really good job at, when the ball does get put in play, making sure that the damage is mitigated by keeping those balls on the ground as much as possible. And, we liked what we saw this past weekend out of Tyler Pitzer, and we'll see, if they decide to go with him on a short week coming up against Alabama, because you would theoretically have to move him to being a Saturday starter because the week's a little bit shorter, so that's one less day of rest, and we'll see how Coach Kingston and staff manage that and what they decide to do going forward. But going up against a team like Alabama, you're going to need to hit the ball really, really well, as Alabama does pretty good themselves. And we saw a nice little spark out of the offense this past weekend. Really kind of started back in game number 3 against Ole Miss on the road in Oxford the other weekend, but carried through to the midweek game where they obviously scored a ton of runs against USC Upstate, and through to taking on number 3 Vanderbilt this past weekend out of Founders Park. And as Coach Kingston has talked about, quite a bit, the offense really falls in line when your best players are performing well, and one of those guys being Ethan Petrie. Here's what he had to say about him.
Well, he's becoming Ethan Petrie. Again, he's, for a guy that hasn't quite hit on all cylinders yet, this year, he still is hitting well over 300 with close to double-digit homers, and we're not even at the halfway point. So it's just we all have such a high expectations and standard for Ethan, and he's really starting to hit his groove again. I think over the last, I would say, 5-6 games. And again, when him and Cole Messina play like they can and like they usually do, it just makes us a really good baseball team. It just does. It's just the way it works. When your best players play their best, that's when you have a chance to beat anybody. And this weekend you saw Messina and Petrie at their best, and we had a dominant performance all weekend.
When you look at Petrie specifically, going back to last weekend against Ole Miss, or the previous weekend against Ole Miss, 0 for 4 in the first game, did hit the home run, went 1 for 4 in the second game, also went 1 for 4 in game number 3 as well. The weekend as a whole was not great, only hit 166 and had 7 strikeouts. But once we got into the midweek game against USC Upstate, went 2 for 3 with 2 RBIs, as well as a home run, and then rolled that into another very successful weekend with hitting 625 as a whole, including 6 RBIs and 2 home runs. And again, when you have a guy that comes in as a preseason All-American, much like Cole Messina as well, had a great weekend as himself with 4 RBIs and 1 home run too. As Coach Kingston said, when those 2 guys are playing at their best, specifically in that 2 and 4 spot like they occupy, the rest of the offense typically falls in. And you have Kennedy Jones, who's obviously been hitting very well this season, was your leading in batting average before Dylan Brewer overtook him this past weekend. But you have a lot of production that can come from the top of that lineup, and if those guys can play at the level that we expect them to play at, this team can be very, very dangerous through the run of conference play. But you hope this momentum keeps up, especially as you head into this weekend matchup taking on Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa, an Alabama team that is going to be looking for some retribution after falling to Georgia this past weekend out there in Athens. And as we learned on the road against Oxford the other weekend, there are no easy environments in the SEC by any means. So you're in a much better situation going in there, being 1-1 as far as conference series go overall, as opposed to you could have potentially been going in 0-2 if you would have lost to Vanderbilt this past weekend in desperation and in must-win mode going into Tuscaloosa, because each and every series in the SEC is obviously very, very valuable, and you can't afford to fall behind anybody if you want to make a serious run in the conference as far as the regular season goes. So South Carolina's still sitting pretty good right now, having won its last 4 conference games, and again, coming up on Thursday, getting the next opportunity to do that against Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Extra Point, hit some Firehouse Subs text of the hour, get your thoughts on what's going on in the world of Gamecock sports, as there is quite a bit. Of course, led off a little bit earlier with Meechie Johnson news, so we'll dive into some of that coming up once again. It is the Extra Point. I'm Tyler Head. Ed Bird producing on the other side of the glass on your Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Tyler Head, along with you, wrapping up today's edition of The Extra Point. Coming up next in the Garnet Trust Hour, another conversation with Liv Thompson, former South Carolina women's basketball player, as Wes and Chris have been keeping up with her through these past couple weeks as she's, kind of navigated her way through, talking about the NCAA women's tournament and the SEC tournament a couple weeks ago from the perspective of a former player and kind of what Dawn Staley and her crew are dealing with and facing on a game in, game out basis. It's very good insight, very good perspective. And again, another conversation about that coming up with Olivia Thompson as they look ahead to the Sweet 16 coming up a little bit later on this week as they will take on Indiana on Friday at 5 o'clock. Want to hit the text line again, as I mentioned to start the show. The Meechie Johnson news coming out yesterday afternoon of him officially entering the transfer portal, opting not to play his final year of eligibility here at South Carolina, and pursuing opportunities elsewhere, which sounds like it might end up being Ohio State, returning home to the place that he started his college career at. Tim in Charlotte weighs in and says, it sucks Meechie is leaving, assumed he'd be back as a core for next year's team, but he still gave us his all for 2 years, and if he can go maximize financially for himself right now, I can't blame him at all. And I think that's a really good mindset to have when you look at Meechie Johnson's situation, that yes, it does suck that South Carolina is losing him, where he was going to be, once again, one of the key guys on this team if he were to come back for 2023 or 2024 and 2024 and 2025, excuse me. But as Meechie Johnson mentioned in his little Instagram live, we don't understand things from his perspective 100%. We are not going to completely understand everything about it. And is there a financial aspect to it that's going to come into play? Probably, because NIL is ever present in the world of college sports, and you can't look at somebody transferring without that being the first thing that pops in your mind. And again, I don't know, where Ohio State's NIL ranks from a basketball standpoint, but I imagine they have some money up there. And if Meechie Johnson has the opportunity to, A, go back home and play in front of his friends and family at a place that he's been at before, where, he left as just kind of a bench guy, and he can return there in his mind being one of the feature guys, one of the guys on that team to close out his college career, then that's fantastic. Add in addition to the fact that maybe he's, can get an opportunity from an NIL standpoint that's more beneficial to him, or at least is comparable to maybe what he was getting here, where he can add on to playing in front of his friends and family, and it ends up being the perfect scenario for him. So I like that mindset, Tim. I don't like when people automatically skew negative when somebody decides to enter the transfer portal and just try and start discrediting what they've done in their time at that school and say, well, he was a streaky shooter. And, he wasn't all that great anyway, and he wasn't the main part of this offense. Like, no, Meechie Johnson was a big part of the reason why South Carolina has had the success that they've had this season. We've seen him have plenty of just stellar games. I mean, going back to that game against Oregon on Friday, he really took it into his, Thursday, he really took it into his own hands to make some things happen, especially in the second half of that game when South Carolina's offense just wasn't clicking the way that it needed to. And that's the kind of competitor and that's the kind of player that you are losing in Meechie Johnson with him going to the transfer portal, is somebody that is a little bit tenacious and somebody that is, not afraid to go out there and take chances, as we've seen with him so many times when it came to taking some of those long three-point attempts. Maybe they weren't all, the best advised three-point attempts, but he was a guy that wasn't afraid to take risk. And I think that's something you can appreciate in a player. And I, for one, am sad to see him go. And I would love to have him back at South Carolina for another season. But again, we certainly are never going to understand the full scope of what went into this decision and why he's deciding to do what he's deciding to do. But I think the best situation is just to thank him for what he did here at South Carolina and, wish him the best going forward. And he's a guy that I think you're probably going to see a lot of highlights from if he does decide to go to Ohio State, and a name that is not going to fade into obscurity by any means, but to just hate that he's not going to be here at South Carolina next season. But again, as I mentioned, this is where Lamont Paris, who again you just locked in for the long term, where losing players and having to replace guys on your roster is just a normal thing you deal with being a head coach, especially at a Power 5 institution, where it's like, okay, here's where you place your faith in Coach Paris that he's going to be able to go out there in the transfer portal and find those type of guys to replace Amici, to replace Talon Cooper, to replace BJ Mack, or whoever else might enter the transfer portal, because there's no, reason why a Miles Studi or Jacoby Wright or Zachary Davis might not enter either. Not that we want them to, but it's possible, just because that's the nature of college sports. And if one of the or multiple of those guys enter, well, guess what? You're having to replace them too. Whether it be with guys coming out of the portal or guys, coming in playing for the first time, like an Austin Hero who was a redshirt this past season. Eli Ellis may reclassify for next year. Who knows? So a lot of questions to be answered this offseason. But again, you got to put your faith in Coach Paris that he's going to be able to go out there and put together a good team for 2024 and 2025 and keep the momentum rolling off of what was a fantastic and historic year for Gamecock men's basketball. Coming up next, it is the Garnet Trust Hour. Wes Mitchell sitting down with Olivia Thompson as they look back on this past weekend in the NCAA tournament, look ahead at the Sweet 16 as well. That's all coming up next here on The Game. All right, welcome back in. Another Garnet Trust Hour on the game. Our special guest, this is part 3 with Olivia Thompson. Of course, talking some South Carolina women's basketball. Liv, how we doing today?
Doing great. Doing
Good.
great.
Glad to have you back. And obviously, we got a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. How excited, how happy are the fams right now after watching South Carolina? We need a glossary, I think, like obliterate, destroy. I don't know how many different words you can come up with. That was one of the most dominant efforts I've ever seen. How excited are the fams after watching what they saw on Sunday?
Oh, I'm sure they're thrilled. I mean, I went. The energy in the building was insane. I think that was one of the more exciting games that I've seen personally, just as a spectator. That was definitely a very hyped game. So I'm excited for them having a good game like that going into the Sweet 16.
Yeah, another Sweet 16. And it's one of those things, like, it almost becomes expected, but you kind of do, even during the stretch, you got to remind yourself, like, hey, these are all humans. Like, you do have to still go execute. You have to go play the game. These are real people. This is, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is completely different, for the most part, group of girls than was out there last year, than was out there the year before. And so just the fact in general that they have continued to execute is, I think, a credit to the coaching staff, but then to the girls themselves too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they just want to have fun, and you're seeing it. I mean, the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, I feel like they have taken it just to another level. I do wonder, just kind of having a little bit of time off to get their feet back, and then, they had a couple scares in the SEC tournament, which maybe helps you a little bit. Let's go into PC first. That was a game. I mean, I know any given day anybody can beat anybody, but this is a game that South Carolina, you knew they were going to win. But to me, Olivia, it was more about for them to play their game. Like, they could play an F game, basically, and probably still win this game. But it was more about going ahead, maybe knocking a little rust off from the time off, and just getting back into your game and taking care of PC instantly and kind of start to get ahead to North Carolina. And that's obviously what they did in game 1 of the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's good to have first-round games like that because it gives you an opportunity to get sharp. Even though you're going to be more skilled than your opponent, it's time to really, really execute and focus on being sharp in your sets, working on things that need practice, because you're right, you do need to knock that rust off before going into more difficult games.
Yeah, and so when I saw North Carolina on the bracket, on the schedule for South Carolina, I instantly kind of was taken back to when they played earlier this year. I mean, that was a tight basketball game, and it was at Chapel Hill, but still, I saw the betting, like the Vegas line on the game was like 21.5 this time. And I was like, man, that's kind of high considering how tight the two teams were the last time they played. But that may be the most dominant effort I've ever seen, especially in the first half, when you're talking about, like a true top conference power opponent. Like, this was not just some team that you expected to be able to dominate regardless. Like, this was South Carolina playing upper level basketball, top to bottom, your starting five, the bench, everybody was involved. Everybody played well. I mean, can you think back to a time that it was just all clicking as well as it did in that first half on Sunday at CLA?
Shoot. For a whole game like that?
Yeah.
I think about it. I instantly go back to UConn my freshman year. I feel like we were on that game. It was just everything was clicking for us. Everything was in motion. And I mean, shoot, that's me thinking back to 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, that goes to show you how hard it is to execute well for an entire game. But their 3-point shooting ability was just on another level. And that's something that this team this year is amazing at executing, is those 3-point shots, and it takes you far.
Yeah, and they were all falling, and there was at one point in the game, I looked, and Fulwiley at the time was 3 for 3 from 3. Tessa Johnson was 3 for 3 from 3. And Tahina Paopao was 2 for 3 from 3. So, that's I'm not a math major, but that was 9 3-pointers, and among those 3 girls, you had only missed 1. And I mean, I'm looking over there at the North Carolina girls and their fans in that little section over there, and they just have this look on their face like,
They were befuddled.
Yeah, befuddled. There you go.
Yeah.
There's like, what do we do?
There's
like,
no word. There's nothing you can do when a team is shooting that well and that that consistently, and everything else is also clicking for them. You're not winning against that team. Like, it's just not gonna happen. Especially a team like South Carolina, where even if their 3-point shots aren't going in, they're gonna find a way to score. They're gonna go to the basket. They're gonna hit their post players. They're gonna get to the free throw line. They're gonna get your bigs in trouble. I mean, it's just they're a very, very hard team to guard, very hard team to play. But that was a very impressive game for them.
The crazy part was they weren't just hitting their 3-pointers. To your point, like they were playing lockdown defense. They were forcing turnovers. Cardoso was getting hers inside. Kitts had a pretty big day off the bench too. I mean, it was just top to bottom. Everybody was playing well. Was there an MVP to this game for you for South Carolina? Or, I mean, it was such a balanced effort.
It was. I'm going to have to give it to Malaysia, though. She's
a different level.
Man. Yes. Oh, my gosh. She's another level. And, I mean, when she's in the game and when she's on, everything else, the whole building lights up. I mean, she went in the game and the crowd erupted. Like, you just felt the energy in the room increase as soon as she touches the floor. And when you have that sort of impact before you even touch the ball, I mean, that's different. And she's a freshman, so it's so exciting. She's such an exciting player to watch, and you can just tell she's having fun out there. So that just makes it even better.
Yeah, we're obviously not on video, but we're both like smiling, just kind of like talking
we're
about
geeking
it.
right
like,
now.
There's something. It's like it factor. Like the it factor gets thrown around maybe too much, but she is like it factor
Definition
personified.
Of it. Yes.
I mean, how much more balanced have you seen her game become versus like even just game one, fast forward, and even North Carolina is a great example because that was the day that Staley kind of benched her. Like she didn't play her as much.
Yeah.
She wasn't happy, I think, with the defensive effort, maybe some small things she wanted out of her. And now you kind of look at the comparison of how she looked Sunday afternoon.
Right.
She's a freshman. She looks like a complete player already.
Oh my God, she looks so comfortable out there, and that something about Malaysia that's extremely impressive, and is just going to keep elevating her game to another level, is how coachable she is. She easily could have sulked because of the first North Carolina game. She could have let it carry over into other games. That disappointment in herself, frustration with Coach Staley for benching her, but she took that moment as an opportunity to learn and to get better because she wants to be great. And I mean, she already is an incredibly great player, but she just wants to keep getting better. So she took that and she let it open up her game. She trusted Coach Staley, and I mean, you see where it's taken her now.
Yeah, I who knows what the upside even is, just seeing how good she is now. I mean, I think it's limitless. I loved how she's one of those players and people, she can kind of take over whenever she wants. But even when she had that stretch where she was like stealing the ball on one end and then making crazy passes on the other end. And then she had the one where it was like a loose ball, but then they got the ball back to her and she hit that three in the corner. And it was right after she had, I think, blocked a shot on the other end.
Yeah, she had blocked Deja Kelly, a jump shot.
Yeah.
Went down
and sprinted. I mean,
yeah, I know. Sprinted, flew down the court, did a reverse layup. I think she like mishandled it or something, but then immediately relocated and spotted up for a three. It's just like her IQ is so high, and her ability, and those two factors together. I mean, just complete player.
Yeah, it's so fun to watch. And then, so in the midst of that moment where there's that stretch where she was kind of just taking over, and then at one point she had another open three. But then she got the ball inside to her teammate. And I kind of you could tell even as a freshman, she was like, yeah, I could take this shot. I could probably score 30 today if I wanted, but I know I'm a part of something greater here.
Yes.
And so as much as it's flashy every time I touch the ball, I think she passed inside to Fagan maybe, and she gets to score. And then it's kind of like I'm going to pick when I'm going to go off and kind of take over. And I do wonder, I think there may be a game where, and we saw it, I guess you'd probably say SEC tournament championship. We saw it to an extent then. There may be a day where she says, look, I have to be the one to just go score 30 or something. But
Exactly.
I love the balance that she has. The trying to think of how you can say it better than I can, but just the wherewithal.
Yes.
Let me keep my teammates involved.
Yeah. Oh, she does a great job with that. And I mean, you can visibly see it that it's something that she takes pride in, to get her teammates involved in the game and, not try to just do everything herself. And I mean, that's a point of emphasis for our whole entire team. I mean, unselfishness is what we strive to do, because you don't need to be selfish on this team. You really don't. We don't have a player that has to touch the ball every time we go down the floor. I mean, our offense really likes it when we can hit the post and then, if they don't score, kick it back out and then get it going, because we don't like to just pass it around the horn. But she does a great job of getting her teammates involved, and it is definitely something she wants to do and looks to do, and it's just going to keep elevating her. So I don't know, I'm still smiling like ear to ear about it. It's just it's so exciting, and I mean it's so rewarding for her to see her hard work paying off, and just how being loose and having fun just opens up your game to endless possibilities.
Yeah, I'm like seeing the replays in my head of some of her highlights as we're talking about her. So I don't know, she's just special. Like that's all I can say. This is the Garnet Trust Hour. This could be the Malaysia Fulwali Hour, and we wouldn't run out of things to say. No. But we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Garnet Trust Hour. She's Olivia Thompson. I'm Wes Mitchell. We'll be right back. I'll remind you once again, coming up later on this evening, got some Gamecock baseball action. Pregame coverage starting at 6:15 for a 6:30 first pitch as they take on Presbyterian, looking to extend their winning streak up to 6 games in a row, going back to that win all the way last weekend against Ole Miss. Also, another opportunity for you to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway going on all baseball season long. Whenever a Gamecock hitter hits a Grand Slam, you could win. All the money in the pot is $25 goes in each and every game. We are at $600 as of right now. Head on over to 1075thegame.com each and every week and register for your chance to win, because when that Grand Slam does happen this season, you want to be the lucky recipient of all that money. Again, the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. All right, back Garnet Trust Hour. We're going to try to talk about people other than Fulwiley, but we may kind of go back to talk about Fulwiley. But hey, how about Tessa Johnson? She came out. She had some big shots. She wasn't quite on against PC, and then she came out, hit some early shots on Sunday. It was kind of a carryover, other than that PC game, for what we saw in the SEC tournament, where I thought she was really good. And I mean, Liv, I just feel like a deep team is just getting deeper and deeper, and they've kind of, I feel like they've flipped the switch to another level in the tournament. Did you kind of see that on Sunday as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the tunnel vision is getting narrower now. The goal is closer. Everything is starting to click. It seems like we knocked some rust off against PC, like you said. Things are going really well against North Carolina, who's a good team, not to deny their talent or their ability by any means. That is a good team. And we rolled over them. Everything was clicking for us. So, I mean, everyone's just feeling good about themselves, but not to a point where it's gonna take over the task at hand. But no, Tessa's a beast, and you've seen Tessa's growth immensely throughout the season. Her defense is leaps and bounds better than when it was when she got here, and she'll attest to that too. And when her shot's falling, she's hard to stop. And I mean, she's also good at going to the basket. So this team has so many layers to it. What did they have? 51 bench points, and North Carolina had 46 points total. Like, it's unreal. Like, that's unreal.
Yeah, it's insane. And you mentioned layers. I like the layers too of all the different personalities within a team. You always have that within a locker room for sure, but with this group, it gets accentuated a little bit more just because of the spotlight that's on all the different girls. And I got there early on Sunday and got to see all the warm ups and stuff. And like it's kind of fun even just seeing which girls have that like locked in face. And then like Tessa, she's a smiler, man. Like I think she's kind of I'm gonna bring some that looseness, just that kind of happy attitude to the court. So I think I feel like all the great teams, regardless of sports, regardless of which sport you're talking about, you kind of need those different personalities. Like, you need the person that's going to lock everybody in and be like, this is not the time to goof off. But you need the other people who, when maybe things are tight, are still grinning and kind of joking around and stuff like that.
Right. No, definitely. And when both our freshmen are like that's good. That keeps the energy light. That keeps everyone a little bit more mellow. Because, I mean, it's a game. Like, basketball is a game. At the end of the day, I know we have big goals and high-level things that we want to accomplish, but it's still a game. We're still the same kids that started playing basketball when we were little. And, I mean, it's translating to something with a little bit more pressure. But you got to stay light. It's something that we have fun doing, and when you have fun, you play good. So they're really showing the truth of that.
Yeah, for sure. And so they advanced to Sweet 16. That's kind of been, like I said, it's like accepted. Like, that's going to happen, but you got to go execute. You got to go do it. And they've done that. So they'll find so, by the way, we're recording this on Monday afternoon. By the time you're listening and hearing it out there right now, you already know South Carolina's opponent. But it's going to be Oklahoma or Indiana. How much of let's talk generally then, since we don't at this time know who it's going to be as we sit here. How much of the next week for the coaching staff with the girls will be kind of film prep about the opponent, and this is what you can expect? Here are some tendencies. Here are some matchups we need to be aware of, versus focused on like us, like we're South Carolina. We're just going to do what we do. How much, I guess, is it one versus the other?
Yeah, I would say more so, since these are teams that we haven't played, that it's going to be focused more on what our opponent is doing. I feel like we're at a good place right now. Of course, there's things to work on, but in my opinion, there's nothing pressing that needs a lot of emphasis for us right now. As long as we keep our same mentality and our same focus, I think we're going to be okay. But still, coach is going to reiterate points of emphasis for us. But yeah, this is a time to lock in on the opponent. I feel like we're going to see Indiana. I mean, the people watching are going to know, but I feel like we're going to see Indiana. I think it's going to be a good matchup between them, Oklahoma and Indiana. But yeah, it'd be nice to see a rematch from. It's been a while since we've played them. It's been since my freshman year, and we haven't played Oklahoma.
I'm trying to think.
I don't think we've ever played Oklahoma, but they're going to be in our conference next year.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's a good point. All right, let's take a gamble then. Let's say it's Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know about them? Any early thoughts? We're still a few days away.
Right.
Any early thoughts on Indiana and kind of what they're all about? They go into that game at 25-5, and they're not heavily favored, but they are definitely favored to beat Oklahoma.
Yeah, I like Indiana's game. They have, God, what's her name? Mackenzie Holmes. She's a very good forward, very skilled forward, good footwork, very good at scoring herself, getting her teammates involved. I'm going through the roster right now, looking at who else they have. Oh, wait, is Grace Burgers? No, she's gone. I apologize. I am not too familiar with. I haven't watched a lot of Indiana's basketball. Okay. But this team is definitely known for their shooting. They're scorers. They play fast. They're a little scrappy. I think it's a good matchup for us. I think there's a lot of similarities between them and us.
Mm-hmm.
And they're gonna test us. So it'd be a good game to just work on us some more. But the heat is getting hotter as we keep going into the tournament.
Yeah, and so the further along you get, I mean, you're only playing good teams. Like you don't get a Sweet 16 without being talented and good. Now, I tend to think if South Carolina plays their A game, I look around, it's going to be tough for anybody to beat this South Carolina team. But the beauty of sports is that you don't always get A+ game versus A+ game. For whatever reason, this could be your off night, and that could be the other team's great night. So that's why you have to show up. But I also think the depth of this South Carolina team gives them options to where if the outside shot's not falling, just force feed Cardoso and go to work in the paint.
Right.
So I think that almost gives Coach Staley some well, hey, let's go to plan B. Let's go to plan C. Let's go to plan D. What do you think as far as game planning? You may have an A plan, but there's always going to be several other options because of how she's built out this team, I think.
Right. And with Indiana being a three-point shooting team, that's going to be a point of emphasis for us on defense. But with them having a dominant post player, it help side defense is going to be a major emphasis because we can't be slacking on that at all. You have to be aware of where your shooters are at all times, and if that's everyone, then there might be a lot of one-on-one action in the post. But Camilla can handle that. Our post can handle that, and you would rather them kill us on the inside than from the outside for sure. But with that being said, we need to be sharp in every aspect. I mean, like you said, if threes aren't falling, we have a backup plan for that. There's plan B, plan C. There's everything there. But it'll be interesting to see.
All right, we're here on the Garnet Trust Hour. We're going to take one more little break here. We'll be right back. She's Olivia Thompson. I'm Wes Mitchell. You're listening to The Game. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back in. Olivia Thompson, our guest here. Part 3, hanging out, Garnet Trust Hour. Head on over to garnettrust.com. Support student athletes and former student athletes like Liv here. Go make a contribution on there. And so, all right, I meant to ask you this when we were talking UNC. I thought it was kind of interesting. South Carolina came out in that full court press from like moment one. And I think it was maybe just 2 or 3 possessions. And I think they went away from it after that. But was that like a message? Was that like Dawn Staley trying to lock the girls in? Like, hey, we're playing defense today. Well, I mean, I don't feel like I've necessarily seen that approach. But I felt like even it kind of like got the crowd into the game too, because they're like, oh, we're like,
right,
90 feet of defense.
Yes, I think that was definitely to rattle them. I don't think they wanted the offense to go through Deja, and I think they were denying her on in that press, trying to make someone else take it up the floor, and that it didn't work all the time. Deja still ended up taking it up the floor, but she was rattled. She was rattled that whole game. They were actually like they were giving her the works. So that was, I think that was good for us. I don't know if it was necessarily like a message, but it was definitely to get them rattled early, because they rattled us early the first time that we played them. Yeah. So you just gotta give that back. It
felt to me kind of like, all right, y'all are gonna have to work for everything today. Like, y'all being UNC, like our message to you is, we're gonna defend you, and if we have to defend you for this entire length of this court, we're going to. And and I think maybe if it would have been a tighter game, maybe South Carolina even did more of that, and just there's so much depth that maybe you just wear North Carolina down, and South Carolina can kind of keep coming at you in waves, whereas UNC has their specific people that are going to have to play well in order to have success. But then the way the game played out. It was just, I mean, we all saw it. So.
Yeah, completely dominant.
Yes, for sure. Have you been watching any more of the tournament on men's or women's side?
I have, yes. Yep, I watched the Oakland NC State game 2 days ago. And then I watched Middle Tennessee LSU yesterday. What else did I watch? That was really all I got around to yesterday. But
did you think LSU was in trouble?
I mean, for LSU, you don't want to be in that situation where you're that close with a team in the second round. And I mean, who they play first round? Was it right? It wasn't Rice.
I don't remember either.
I forget. Yeah. But they were given that wasn't a blowout either. I mean, it was probably towards the end, but it was a pretty competitive game throughout. So they're going into practice with a lot of things to work on, I'm sure. They ended up pulling out that game later on, but Middle Tennessee is a good team. Their good players got in foul trouble a little bit, like middle of the third quarter, which from there it was kind of a downhill for them. But they're a good team. They're a solid team. So I mean, I would be a little bit on my P's and Q's for if I was LSU.
Yeah, they're still a team that can beat anybody on a given night, but they definitely are looking at the first 2 games in a much different way than South Carolina in terms of, are you playing your best basketball right now? You'd probably say no. And Middle Tennessee, I think, probably feels like that game, the flow of that game got taken away from them a little bit just because the way it was officiated.
Oh, my God, yeah.
So, I mean, that was definitely a factor. But we'll see. I mean, it's very hard to kind of look ahead and see what this may mean for South Carolina in terms of who comes out of that side of the bracket, because I think that side is loaded. But we'll see. We've got next week to start to really look ahead into. Hopefully we'll be talking about a South Carolina team that at that point will be headed to the Final Four. So
I know, exciting.
Be cool. Are you gonna take a trip to Cleveland?
You know what? I have a flight booked, but that's all I have. I don't have anything else. I don't have a place to stay. I don't have a ticket. So I'm like, it's out of my hands for right now. So I'll worry about that when it gets a little bit closer. Cutting it a little bit close. Okay, but I had the flight. I've got that flight.
Fams, you heard it.
If y'all got a ticket for me, my address is.
Let's hook it up. Let's make it happen. But again, we don't know as we're recording who the opponent's going to be this week. But What's your single biggest key going into Friday's game for South Carolina to advance to the Elite Eight? Just keep doing what they're doing, or can you formulate anything based on what we've seen? I mean, it's all been good. There's not really a lot to improve, I feel like.
Yeah, just make adjustments quick. Keep doing what you're doing and make adjustments quick. Like, recognize what's not going wrong, recognize what is going right for you, and focus on that more. Just be sharp. Be very mentally focused, and don't fall asleep on defense because both teams can shoot whoever it's going to be.
At what point, as you were kind of going through the NCAA tournament, and maybe it was at no point, but was there like pregame moment where you just started to get a little more tense? Like, could you feel it in the locker room when it was like, all right, this is Sweet 16, all right, this is final, or oh man, we're in a national championship game now.
Yeah.
Like, especially, some of these girls, it'll be their first time in a Sweet 16, and then hopefully this team keeps winning, it's gonna be their first time in a Final Four.
Right.
Can you think back to your freshman year? Did you wake up a little bit different thinking about being in a Final Four game versus, an average Sunday?
Well, my freshman year got kind of screwed up a little bit because of COVID. But
right. Yeah, that's right.
And sophomore year was in San Antonio. That was just a crazy year. That whole tournament was just like a fever dream. But junior year, after we played North Carolina in the Sweet 16, and they gave us the works that game. That was probably like the scariest game of that whole tournament. When we were going into the game against Creighton, we were like, okay, like, we're gonna beat Creighton. Like,
right.
just in the spirit of full transparency, like, we knew we were gonna beat Creighton. When we were going into the UConn game, we felt pretty confident in ourselves. I mean, we were playing some really, really good basketball. Everyone was on point. Things were just clicking for us. We could taste it, and I think that feeling of just tasting it and knowing that you have the pieces to make it happen is just gonna send you to another level. So I know they're feeling excited. I know they're just happy about playing basketball. They're all having a good time together, and that combination makes you unstoppable.
So it's like the confidence sort of overrode any extra nerves because y'all were just like, man, we are the team. We have the team to do this.
Yes,
so let's just go do it.
The confidence and the chemistry, and everything was just clicking. And I mean, I would say everything's clicking for this team right now. It makes me feel really good to see. Gives me a lot of confidence in them, and I know they feel it too. So you can't get too ahead of yourselves, but you have to keep that confidence.
For sure. All right, well, we're going to watch this weekend. Hopefully we'll be sitting right here in 1 week, and we'll be hanging out with Olivia Thompson again, and we'll be talking about South Carolina going to another Final Four. So, Liv, appreciate it as always. Great stuff.
Thank you.
See you next week. And again, this has been the Garnet Trust Hour. This is The Game. For Liv, I'm Wes. We'll talk to Liv next week. See y'all then. Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head wrapping up today's edition of the show. Once again, appreciate Olivia Thompson for hopping in with Wes, talking to him for a little bit. It's really, really cool to get a perspective of a former player, as South Carolina navigates its way through another NCAA tournament, and kind of the way that she explains the steps in the processes, along the way, and kind of what it's like from the eyes of a student athlete is really, really cool. So we certainly appreciate her, giving her time to us, each and every week to be able to do that, as now South Carolina gets set for a Sweet 16 matchup coming up later on this week. We did learn last night the opponent as well as the time of the matchup, as Indiana was able to get by Oklahoma 75-68 up there at Assembly Hall and punch their ticket to the Sweet 16, as that matchup with South Carolina comes up on Friday. That'll be at 5 o'clock. Don't know the specifics on which radio network will have that on just yet, because we do have Gamecock baseball coming up that night as well, taking on Alabama. So we'll get those details to you as soon as we possibly can. But South Carolina in the Sweet 16 once again, looking for the opportunity to return to the Final Four. Should South Carolina beat Indiana in the Sweet 16 on Friday, they would match up with the winner of Oregon State and Notre Dame, as they are on the other end of the Albany 1 regional bracket. And then the winner of that would go on to the Final Four up there in Cleveland. And again, South Carolina looking to return there for yet another year. On the opposite end of the bracket, as I mentioned last night, Iowa getting past West Virginia. That was a very interesting game late, as West Virginia came storming back, went on a big run there. I believe it was 12-2 at one point there in the last couple of minutes of the game. It certainly made things interesting, but Iowa able to pull away there in the waning minutes with the free throws, and they capped off their run at home once again with the win. Final home game for the likes of Caitlin Clark up there in Iowa, as now they move on to the Sweet 16 themselves, taking on Colorado. A Colorado team that took down LSU to start off the season. So a very good Colorado team that comes in as the 5 seed. And on the other end of their bracket, you do have LSU and UCLA squaring off in the Sweet 16. That will come up on Saturday, and the winners of those two games will face each other in the Elite Eight to determine who goes to the Final Four. So the way the brackets ended up working out this year, there would be no rematch in the national championship, but if both teams handle their business on Saturday, we'll get a rematch on, I'm guessing, next Monday, to see who squares off in the Elite Eight, to see who goes to the Final Four out of that side of the bracket. On down on the other end, Texas and Gonzaga will face off. In fact, all of the top 4 seeds still alive in the Portland regional, in the Regional 4 Portland bracket. So you have Texas and Gonzaga squaring off after Texas took care of Alabama in the second round. Gonzaga handled Utah 77-66, and then Stanford and NC State on the other end of that bracket at 2 and 3. NC State getting by Tennessee, and then Stanford getting by Iowa State in their second round matchup. And finally, in the regional 3 out there in Portland, you have Southern Cal, after handling Kansas pretty easily in the round of 32, taking on Baylor. And then on the other end of the bracket, UConn, once again, right there in the mix, taking on Duke after Duke got past Ohio State. One of the few upsets we've really seen of this tournament. 7 seed Duke taking down Ohio State 75-63 in that matchup. And again, that's on the other end of the bracket. So South Carolina is in line with the Regional 4 bracket. So if South Carolina can get past Indiana, they can theoretically get past Notre Dame or Oregon State. In the Elite Eight, they would match up with one of the 4 remaining top seeds in the Regional 4 bracket, being Texas, Gonzaga, NC State, and Stanford in the Final Four. But again, that's several steps ahead. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, as the task at hand now becomes Indiana in the Sweet 16 coming up on Friday. As Olivia Thompson mentioned in that last hour there, that the last time these two teams played was indeed her freshman year back in 2019. In November of that year during non-conference play, and South Carolina came into that game as the number 5 team in the country, and Indiana ended up upsetting them pretty handily, 71 to 257. That was a game that South Carolina, looking back, committed 18 turnovers in that game. Something that we don't see them do at nearly high as a clip anymore, except with the exception of being that Texas A&M game in the SEC tournament a couple of weeks back. So last time these two teams played, that was actually down in the Virgin Islands in the Paradise Jam back in 2019. And that was the last time that Indiana and South Carolina squared off, and Indiana got the better of them. So we'll see what happens coming up on Friday. Looking at this matchup and the specifics of it, no surprise, South Carolina is a heavy favorite in this game. When you look at the ESPN matchup predictor, South Carolina favored by 83.9% to the 16.1% for Indiana. No line on this game as of yet. That'll come out a little bit later on in the week. But this is an Indiana team, when you look at their season so far, obviously coming in as 4th seed, have had a lot of success, 26-5 overall, ended up second in the Big Ten behind Iowa. And when you look back, they did play Iowa twice this year, lost pretty handily earlier on back in January, but the second time they played them, they beat them pretty handily themselves, 86-69 there at the end of February. When you look at their other ranked matchups, though, didn't turn out the best for Indiana. They did beat Tennessee earlier on in the season, but they did again lose that first game to Iowa, and then lost pretty handily to Ohio State at the beginning of February as well. So we'll see how this team stacks up when this game does end up getting played on Friday. And again, it's one of those where South Carolina is always going to get the benefit of the doubt because they are and have been the best team in the entire country. And as long as they play their game, play their style of basketball, they should be fine in that regard. Now, as you get deeper and deeper into the NCAA tournament, obviously the competition level continues to ramp up a little bit more and a little bit more. Especially as you get into these final couple rounds where you're going to potentially be seeing the Texases, you're going to be seeing the Iowas, the Southern Cals, teams like that, the true best teams in the country. But up to this point, South Carolina has been purely dominant. I mean, what they did to Presbyterian North Carolina is nothing short of, I don't want to say amazing, because nothing that this team does should really surprise you at this point in time. But when you talk about taking on a North Carolina team that South Carolina had their struggles with earlier on in the season on the road up there in Chapel Hill, to just completely dominate them the way that they did, especially in the first half of that game, nothing short of amazing, I guess is the best way to put it. And we'll see what they do as they head into the Sweet 16 matchup with Indiana coming up on Friday, and see if they can punch their ticket at that point to the Elite Eight to take on Notre Dame or Oregon State, and see if they can punch their ticket back to the Final Four once again. And, I know we've talked about this a little bit, where ESPN, the way that the bracket is made, you have to imagine they are just hoping to see South Carolina and Iowa face off in a national championship game, because I can't think of any game in the NCAA women's tournament that would draw higher ratings than that. You are going to get Iowa and LSU if both teams win their respective Sweet 16 games coming up later on this week in the Elite Eight, and that will do good numbers, obviously. That game would be positioned for next Monday, if I'm thinking correctly here. But nothing would be bigger than seeing South Carolina and Iowa square off in the national championship, which would theoretically be Caitlin Clark's last game in college, and obviously there'd be the revenge factor from South Carolina's standpoint, given what happened last year in the Final Four. But a lot of basketball played between now and then, but certainly seems like those two teams are on a collision course that continue to play the way that they have played so far to start off the NCAA tournament. We'll talk plenty about basketball coming up in the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Dive back into the Meechie Johnson conversation as he has elected to transfer out of the South Carolina basketball program. All that's coming up next, as well as more football conversation, as we did hear from plenty of players yesterday in their media availability. That's coming up next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. This has been the Garnet Trust Hour here on The Game.